Commanders coming off a extremely emotional Hail Mary prayer answered victory against the Chicago Bears last week. And the Giants coming off a primetime loss in Monday Night Football against the Pittsburgh Steelers. What do we think here, Carmen? What's the matchup that matters here for this one?
Yeah, I go back to the trenches for this because the Giants' defensive line is a strength of their team, and going against the Commanders' offensive line, which is decent enough. They have a fifth-ranked pass blocking grade, 77.4. Overall, 71.9 PFF grade for the Commanders' offensive line. But the D-line in New York, 130 pressures, which is sixth most in the league, 73.7 PFF pass rushing grade, which is eighth, 67 pressures on third and fourth down, those crucial downs, third ranked. And then they have 38 sacks according to the PFF metrics. That's first in the league. So that is the absolute strength of this New York Giants team. There's no doubt about that. How are they going to fare against this Commanders offensive line, which has exceeded expectations, my personal expectations for it. And we do know that Jayden Daniels likes to hold on to the ball a little bit because he can make things happen. He scrambles around. We've seen him also want to push the ball down the field. I did an article actually on foxsports.com just kind of comparing and contrasting the first 4 weeks of the season for Jayden Daniels versus the last 4 weeks. First 4 weeks had like the 40th ranked average depth of target for among qualified quarterbacks. And then you look at the last 4 weeks, and he actually has the fifth longest average depth of target. He is trying to push the ball down the field now, which does require him to hold the ball a little bit more, puts a little bit more stress on the offensive line, going against now this New York Giants defensive line. Again, why I think this is the matchup that matters.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that the Commanders' offensive line and the Giants' defensive line is probably the biggest matchup that matters. But I will say, I also want to point out like how Washington is doing in the red zone as a matchup that matters. And now that I'm looking at the sheet, I see that that's a plus factor of yours. So we're kind of just having the same conversation here. But we talked about Washington and their red zone percentage, Cliff Kingsbury, and how great he was in the red zone and how high of a clip they were converting in the red zone through the first couple of weeks of the season. And now that has not been the case. They're down to 41% conversion in the red zone over the last 3 weeks. That's 28th in the NFL. So not only are they not in the top 5 and number 1 in the league like they were at the beginning of the year, they're all the way down near the bottom 5 when you talk about what's been over the last 3 games, the most recent trend here for this team. And so it's been a little bit more shaky. And I'm not saying that we should, hate on this Washington team, but to me, like the offense is looking a little less of a juggernaut than it was certainly when Jayden Daniels was really catching fire in the first couple of weeks in the season. So that's your plus factor though. So I want you to, is there something that I didn't hit there with Washington's red zone that you wanted to hit on here?
Yeah, I mean, that became very, very evident in this last game against the Chicago Bears because the Hail Mary will make you forget that with 25 seconds to go in the game, the Bears had clawed their way back, pun intended, to take the lead in that game. And they were set to take it. They were set to steal it after not leading that entire game. They were trailing the entire game, came back, made it happen. And it was because that Chicago Bears defense stymied the Washington Commanders offense. There it is. In the red zone. They were 0 for 3 on the day. Once inside the red zone, they kicked field goals. And that's not going to cut it against better competition, against better teams, against teams that are more productive on the offensive side of the ball. They were lucky at that point that Caleb Williams and the Bears offense were going through a lot of changes and shuffling around on the offensive line due to injuries that they had no rhythm for the first 3 quarters of that game. But then Caleb Williams caught fire in his last 2 drives, going 8 of 9 for 85 yards, leads a couple scoring drives, and now the Bears take the lead, and you need a prayer to win that game. The prayer was answered, as we talked about, but you can't live that way by any means. So you need to start scoring when you do move up and down the field with ease. That's great. But what matters is what happens when you get inside the 20. And that's just not something that Washington has been effective at over the last few weeks.
My plus factor in this game is Mike Sainristil, the corner for the Washington Commanders, who I've been so impressed with so far this season.
You've been very high on him.
He was, and I mean, when I was evaluating here for the draft, I thought he was just going to be a slot corner because of his size. I thought his size was going to really limit where he was going to be able to be played. And even with that being the case, I gave him a 2nd round grade. Like even as just a slot corner, I feel like he still would have been worthy of a 2nd round pick. And Washington's looked at him and said, okay, well, you're just a competitive corner. We're going to put you on the outside. So he's played mostly on the outside this season. So he's got that slot corner versatility to him. He had that experience while he was at Michigan. He's a former wide receiver, so he knows how wide receivers think as well. But now he has that outside experience too. This is the perfect candidate to say, all right, I'm going to match up one-on-one against Malik Nabers. And basically nobody does that. Malik's been pretty much uncoverable so far halfway through his rookie season. And I'm really looking forward to this matchup because if Sainristil can slow down Malik Nabers at all whatsoever, I don't know what else the Giants really have in this game. Sure, Tyrone Tracy, I think, is going to be a factor. We saw Darius Slate get involved with some of the deep passes, but that's all complimentary stuff, in my opinion, based upon what you get out of Malik Nabers. And so I wouldn't have said this even a couple of weeks ago, but the Commanders now have somebody in their secondary who you can legitimately match up with against one of the best wide receivers in the NFL and Nabers. So how Sainristil plays against him could go a long way into, even if Washington maybe isn't going to light the world on fire like we've seen them do in the early parts of the season, they could still be ahead at the end on the scoreboard because of how well they can play Malik Nabers starting with Mike Sainristil's role.